All right, folks. We have arrived at our last talk of the day. Thank you very much for sticking it out because you are in for a treat. Biometrics are a thing. And what we have here is a challenge of securing Aadhaar. It is an interesting biometric database in India. And to talk about that, we have Dolev Farhi. Thank you. Please give it up for Dolev.
There's actually a nice picture of Taj Mahal, but you can't see it for some odd reason. So first, I would like to acknowledge the volunteers and BSides organizers. You guys do amazing things every year. It's just getting better and better. So thank you. Just before I start, I want to talk about the idea of a biometric database in general. This talk is not about whether the idea is good or bad. It's about an existing system and how it functions today, rather than the biometric database is a shitty idea. That's not what I'm going to be talking about. This is a serious system that is ongoing, and there's a lot of issues around it, so that's what I'm going to be discussing. So my name is Dolev. I'm a lead security engineer at a large Indian fintech company. In the past, I used to work for F5 and CyberArk. I moved to Toronto 3.5 years ago from Israel. Some of you maybe know me from DC416. Occasionally, I do IoT research for McAfee. And a shameless plug, I'll be releasing a book at Sector in a few days. If you have an opportunity to be there, we'll have free copies for everybody. So the presentation goes like this. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about India in general. Then we're going to move on to Aadhaar introduction, the ecosystem, and Aadhaar security. So India is a very special place. I've been in India twice. I've never seen anything like it before. Best drivers in the world. Best drivers in the world live in India. So let's talk about the demographics. The reason why they're so good is because today there's 1.35 billion people in India. It's a mind-blowing number. Next, by 2028, it's estimated to go above 1.45 billion people and to surpass China. By 2050, it's going to go north of 1.7 billion people. The reason why I said it's India have the best drivers is because it looks like this, and there are 0 accidents. 0 accidents. I'm not kidding. India is one of the fastest developing countries in the world today, which basically will allow you to understand why Aadhaar is such a big thing and why India is actually a digital pioneer in that space as well. So pop quiz. Out of 1.35 billion people, how many do you think have internet access today? Guesses. You can guess. 70%? 20%? 20%. OK. So around 40%, around 520 million people. It's a large number, but it's still only around 40%. So not a lot of people have internet access in India today. It's trivial for us to have internet, but in many other cases around the world, it's not the case. So internet is a fundamental thing for us, but not over there. But there's a more fundamental problem other than internet access. The problem is that the biggest barrier preventing the poor in India from getting benefits is proving their identity. So some people in India just don't have documents. Can you imagine not being able to prove who you are? It's crazy thinking about it. So not everyone has a passport in India, a driver's license, or even a birth certificate. So India needed a solution. And as I mentioned before, India wants to be a digital pioneer. So the Indian government launched a campaign called Digital India back in 2015. And it has 3 simple goals. Connect rural areas to the internet, bring all front-end government services online, meaning that you can do everything online, you don't have to go anywhere. India is a big country, a lot of rural areas. It's very difficult for people to get to places. And lastly, create opportunities for citizens. So if you have internet access, you have access to knowledge, you have easier access to certain services that the government provides, and so on. So this, how is this related to Aadhaar? So if you take the fact that Indians have, some of them have a hard time proving who they are and have or don't have any documents at all, they decided that maybe a biometric database is a good idea. So that's where Aadhaar comes into play. So Aadhaar was actually way before the digital India campaign started. It was already there. It was accumulating more and more members. But the digital India campaign actually gave it a boost. So what is Aadhaar? So it doesn't stand for anything. It means foundation in multiple Indian languages. I believe it's in Hindi, Sanskrit, and maybe other languages. There is around 22, I think, official Indian languages. So it stands for foundation. But it's more than just a word. It's a 12-digit random number linked to a resident's biometric identity. But it's not only a number, it's an entire ecosystem. A very complex system that is functioning today with a lot of components involved in the authentication part of it and the enrollment part of it, which I'll get to in a few seconds. And one thing that is extremely important for you to know is that it's governed by one entity called UIDAI. Which stands for Unique Identification Authority of India. It's a little difficult to say 5 letters every time because I'm going to be referencing UIDAI multiple times. So I might just say UIDAI, maybe I'll say Aadhaar database, just so you know it's governed by one entity, which is also a problem. So today, UIDAI are the only ones who can sue people for mishandling and misusing Aadhaar data. You, as a citizen, cannot sue a company or sue the government for mishandling your data if somebody leaked it or anything else like that. UIDAI are the ones who can do this. And another thing that is important to know about Aadhaar is that it's used as a proof of residentship rather than proof of citizenship. So what are the goals of Aadhaar? Basically to allow easier access to public and private sector services, enhance delivery of welfare benefits. This is done by, there's a thing called direct benefit transfer, for that if you have Aadhaar, you can get government benefits directly to your bank account. Accelerate passport issuing process, something that is very trivial for us, can take a relatively long time. With Aadhaar, it accelerates that process. It can take shorter time. And it helps identifying, It helps identifying individuals like of course, but it's more geared towards natural disasters, criminal cases, and things like that. So identifying for the purpose of a safer India. It prevents the need to resubmit documents to the government. So when you enroll in different services in India, you have to come up with different documents every time. It's a pain for people who have difficulties getting those documents and proving themselves or who they are every single time they need to enroll in some kind of service. And it prevents fraudulent subsidies claims. So in the past, people used to resubmit claims over and over again in order to extract money from the government. With Aadhaar, it makes it a little more complex. And it allows for inclusion. That's a big thing. So UIDAI or Aadhaar in general, the idea of it is to include all citizens and allow equal rights for everybody. Whether if you have money or you don't have money, you'll be able to enroll in services just for being Indians a resident. So the goal is to allow for everybody to use that system. It claims to be a zero-knowledge system, meaning that they have no idea what you're doing, who you authenticate with, and so on. So they claim that they don't have a way to profile you. So let's talk about the ecosystem and architecture. So there are two components to Aadhaar. There's the enrollment part, which is what I'm going to be talking right now, how you get into the system. And there's the authentication part, which I'll talk in a bit. So one day you decide that today is a good day to enroll in Aadhaar. So the first step is making a decision. This is what I want to do. I want better benefits for myself, easier access. Let's enroll. The second phase is you go to an enrollment agency. Our enrollment agencies are all over India these days, and they take your name, your date of birth, your gender, your address, your photo, 2 iris scans, and 10 fingerprints. This is mandatory if you enroll in Aadhaar. It's not optional. The only thing that optional is email and the phone number, but you will need phone number down the road anyways. And then from the enrollment agency, your data can go through 2 routes. One is by the enrollment agency sending that data to a post office on encrypted disks or through SFTP. And the second option is using a registrar that is basically authorized by UIDAI to get that data from you to the database. And that information goes up to upstream UIDAI. That's the enrollment service. Once the data is there, it goes through deduplication process, meaning, do I know this record? Have I seen it before? If not, it goes through a couple of integrity checks. If everything is good, you get a 12-digit number, and you get a letter delivered to your home with all the information you need to know about Aadhaar. At the end of this process, you end up with an Aadhaar card and an e-Aadhaar, which is a PDF, digital version of Aadhaar. But it fits the purpose in the way that Aadhaar wants to eliminate paper in general. It's a paperless system, but because people use it for as a proof of identity, they decided that they will also grant physical cards. Quick note on e-Aadhaar, it's a password-protected PDF. If your name is John Doe and you were born 2018, your password is John 2018. That's a big problem because of the leaks. Another interesting article, I'll have a link in the references at the end of the presentation. Somebody made, basically the age group of India is, I think, 0 to 14 is about, I can't remember, most of the country are around 15 to 64 in age. So it's easy to brute force the passwords, also because some of the names are very common in India. And that's a big problem. Another problem is with the enrollment process. So if we looked at this, there's a problem that enrollment agencies get paid for every single successful enrollment. That means they are motivated to get some information, whether it's a real person or not, into the database. So 50,000 enrollment agencies have been blacklisted since Aadhaar inception. No joke. And the fines are around 10,000 rupees. I can't remember what rupee is converted to Canadian dollars, but it's not a lot. And I think they get banned for about 4 or 5 years. So what were they banned for? They were banned for selling Aadhaar for as little as 2 rupees, fraudulent enrollments, and submission of fake documents. So they would come up with fake documents and just submit it, and maybe that entry was not in the database, it enrolled successfully, they got money. Today, there are 23,000 enrollment agencies registered, but only 880 are active. So this is the enrollment part. Let's talk about the authentication part. So there are 4 players in the Aadhaar ecosystem. There's the client, which is you, the resident. There is the service provider, which can be a bank, can be a telco. There's a proxy, and there is UIDAI. So every time you want to authenticate to a service, this is the flow of the information. So let's say that you want to open a bank account. You go to your bank. You authenticate with your Aadhaar. So for example, you can do an OTP authentication. You provide them the Aadhaar number, you get an SMS, and you go through an authentication process. So the way UIDAI is made it is that they will have a proxy, authorized proxies, getting that information from the service providers, which can be private companies as well, and they will be able to streamline all the authentication requests by saying, okay, I trust these 30-something proxies. They'll be able to kind of like, there's some DDoS mitigations there, and also a way to control all the information that they get. So this is the basic flow. Now, it looks simple, right? There's only 4 players, but not really. There is billions of users. There's 317 service providers registered today, and there's 31 proxies. That means the information goes to many places. Some service providers work with multiple proxies. So your information can be anywhere in this picture. So let's talk about authentication statistics. So it's a lot of information, a lot of volume of requests. So daily between 18 million to 34 million authentications a day. Now, an authentication means you enroll in some service. So that's a lot of data, a lot of information. A lot of companies have Aadhaar data. It's not just about it being in a database somewhere. So let's talk about some Aadhaar security. So problem. Like I mentioned, Aadhaar traverses many paths until it actually reaches the end database. So over 200 government websites so far leaked Aadhaar data. The largest one was, I think, 131 million records. But I wanted to check how bad it really is when it comes to security. So what I did was asking myself, can it really be that bad? So this was my plan. My plan was, phase 1, find all of India's government websites. So there's a convenient way of doing this. There is a website called GOI Directory. It's the Government of India directory. It has all the government websites that they have to offer. Phase 2, scrape the website. Phase 3, getting those websites, sorry, I jumped to phase 3. Scraping resulted in 6,300 domains. There were actually over 9,000, not the catchphrase from Dragon Ball Z. There were over 9,000 domains, but only 6,300 were responsive. Phase 3, fingerprint all the websites. I wanted to know exactly what's in there. So this is how it goes. 1,600 FTP servers, 771 SSH servers, 192 RDP servers, 6,100 web servers, 123 SMBs, ironically 23 Telnet, 1,050 MySQL servers, and almost 1,300 MySQL servers, DNS servers. At some point, I'll need to go to India, so I decided only to focus on the web and get some understanding what those websites are and how they look like, what do they offer, and things like that. I want to ask, so I was sitting at home preparing this presentation. I was asking myself, maybe you guys think the same way. If a website has a design from the 90s, does that mean necessarily that the security will be bad? Yes or no? No? Yes. How many yes? How many no? OK, fair. So if user interface is any indication to the level of security, it's not good. It's not good. This is not like a exception. There are many like this. I'm with those who raise their hands when, yeah, the under construction logo. Yeah, I'm with those who think that design from the 90s probably means that security is not practiced really well. So what did I find? So defaced government websites. There is like defacement pages still there. Publicly open administration panels. Vulnerable services, we all know that those happen. Directed listings with sensitive data. Indexed CSVs and PDFs of Aadhaar data, including those e-Aadhaar that I mentioned. Now, if you take into consideration there's 1.30-something billion Indians, and the age group is from 15 to 65, brute forcing is not a big deal. And Google dorking for Aadhaar cards will return really scary results. So 15% of the websites use only HTTP. 55% of those who have HTTPS never redirect in the first place to HTTPS. 58% of the websites don't use any kind of security headers. 90% of the WordPress instances run a vulnerable version. One thing that is important to mention, this is not UIDAI. This is not the Aadhaar authority that hosts all that information. It's incredibly important to understand this. A lot of Indian government entities use Aadhaar data and can potentially leak that data. So there's, as far as I know, as far as my research gone, I could not find a reference that shows UIDAI leaked Aadhaar data directly. I could not find this. But that doesn't mean that it's OK to leak data if it didn't come from the root source. So next thing that I checked is the SSL certificate issuers. 43% let's encrypt. What's interesting is the 5% self-signed. So 6,000 websites, 5%, that's 300. Yeah, 300 websites use self-signed certificate publicly. GoDaddy, GeoTrust, 6%, Intrust, 10%, cPanel, which I didn't even know were a CA, 14%, Komodo, 15%. So let's talk about UIDAI in general. So why is Aadhaar such a discussed topic? So there's some confusion between the fact Aadhaar data is all over the internet and whether UIDAI was breached. There was no proof of that. But UIDAI is basically using Boolean statements. We're secure. That's it. So on their website, there's a FAQ. The first thing that you see, or at least one of the top 5 that you see, is a question. So is it true? We keep hearing in media that Aadhaar data was breached. Aadhaar database has never been breached during the last 7 years of its existence. Stories around data breach are mostly cases of misreporting. Aadhaar data is fully safe and secure at UIDAI, and I bolded it because that's the key here. It may be safe there. I don't know. But it's not safe all the way there. So there's a lot of players that have that data, and obviously it doesn't seem like security is being practiced really well. So as long as it doesn't come from UIDAI, it seems like it's not a big of a problem, or at least they're dismissing any kind of reports about Aadhaar leaks, because nobody proved that it came from them. And I mentioned at the beginning that they're the only ones who can sue people or sue companies for mishandling the data, and that's a problem for the citizen. So how many people actually have Aadhaar? So there's 1.35 billion Indians. Around 1.22 billion have Aadhaar or are enrolled in Aadhaar today. So this is the enrollment trend. So every month there's around 3.2 million new people who are enrolled. January had around 7 million. So it's still growing. So you must be asking yourself, so Aadhaar must be mandatory if you have so many people who are enrolled. No, it's not mandatory. But how is this possible? How did they get so many people into the database when there's like so much noise going on around privacy concerns and security concerns? So it's not mandatory, but good luck opting out. No tax returns, no government benefits, no loans, no mutual funds, no insurance, no scholarships, no SIM card. There's a couple of asterisks there, and the reason why this is in red is because this is a still ongoing thing. Until 2 days ago, banks could ask for you to link Aadhaar to the bank account. Today, they can no longer do it. So there are still discussions happening in the Supreme Court of India about delinking Aadhaar, or at least allowing people to enroll in services without the need for Aadhaar. But so they managed to do that for, I think, the banks maybe, but in other places you still have to link the Aadhaar to whatever service you're enrolling. So how is this possible in the first place? Where you have so many people enrolled, so many problems, and suddenly everything is linked to Aadhaar, but it's not mandatory. So how the hell did this happen? And my thought on this is this. The salami technique is rolling out a service with a serious impact extremely slowly so that the people who are impacted are not going to notice. And by the time they notice, it's going to be way too late. It's a really dumbed down version of what the salami technique is, but it shows you that something can start and you won't realize, and it's going to be all over the place. And I think that's one of the concerns of biometric databases in general, is that more and more services are going to use that, and you will have to be on a database. So what are some of the problems with biometric databases is that people are afraid of being profiled. When you, if they are in fact a zero-knowledge system, sorry, if they are not a zero-knowledge system, then they know exactly who's authentic or who's asking for your data, or to prove who you are, then they can profile you. Okay, you want to enroll for a bank account. Okay, we know that now. You talk to this bank and that bank, so they can build a profile around you and understand your path or what you're doing in your day-to-day. So there's a privacy concern there, obviously. And also, having everything in one single database of 1.22 billion records with biometric data is a concern for good reasons. So the bottom line is Aadhaar security depends heavily on the link. So supply chain problems are everywhere. And it seems that as long as it's not a direct UIDAI leak, there will probably not be no concrete steps are going to be taken to ensure that nothing gets leaked, or at least people can be held accountable for misusing Aadhaar data. I think that's it for me. I think we have time for questions, right? Do we? Yeah, cool. Any questions? Yeah. So very good question. So usually the companies that enroll, so the authentication part does not require, companies don't have, or at least they shouldn't have, your biometric data. But cards and scans of cards and the PDFs have been leaked. And those have your information in general. Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Yep. I can remember it being mentioned as a attack vector, at least in the Aadhaar case, maybe. One of the things that they actually found was the service provider replaying authentication on behalf of the user without them knowing. Yeah. In what? Oh, I only know about one case that happened. Maybe, yeah. Not that I'm aware. Not that I'm aware. Yeah. So one of the things that if you're on Twitter, you will see a lot of Aadhaar debates. One of the things that is kept being mentioned is the use of insecure apps and things like that. But there's no concrete information that it leaked from the main database. But they believe that it happened. They're just not willing to acknowledge it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good question. So you come up with a couple of documents that you should have, but at the end of the day, they scan you, and if the record is not there, you will be on the database. You can try. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. It's a problem of taking responsibility on the process. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a problem throughout the process in general. There was one recent case where somebody managed to bypass operator security protections, and he could, or at least he mentioned that he could enroll freely. And then UIDAI rejected that, saying, hey, the integrity check failed in the backend. Maybe you, on the client side, received successful. Yeah, you enrolled successfully, but in the database, that didn't happen. Again, it's a matter of we don't really have enough understanding what's happening in the backend. So it's all a lot of assumptions. Yeah, I read a lot, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, PAN card, yep. 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 I think it's both. Any question? Yeah? That's a really good question. I don't know the reason behind it. It seems extremely weird that there is 23 registered, 23K, and only 800 of them are active. But also consider the fact that there's already 1.22 billion people in Aadhaar. Yeah. Which part? So the enrollment agencies, those are private. They are contracted by UIDAI to do the enrollment. The authentication part. So the authentication part, you need license to be part of the authentication in general. So the proxies need a proxy license. They're called ASAs. I changed some of, there's a lot of acronyms around Aadhaar. I tried to narrow down to only what you actually need to know to understand the concept. But there's a thing called ASA, which is the proxy, and there's the user authentication part, which is the service provider. They all need license. So they are all, you can't just easily introduce a malicious component. At least not, that's not what I think you can do. Yeah. The service providers are private sector, some of them, yeah. And yeah. Yeah, that's one of the concerns, actually, that the service providers are sharing that information to profile you. That's one of the unknowns. Any other questions? Yeah. Great question. So one of the things that UIDAI mentions in their, there's the Aadhaar Act, is you need to be secure, but they don't mention any kind of hows. So it's, okay, I'll be secure. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Can you repeat that? That's why that's why we're here. It's a very good question, and I think if only the entity that governs Aadhaar can sue people, that's a really big problem because nobody can be held accountable for anything. Yeah. So they have been patching some of the fundamental problems. For example, the Aadhaar ID. They created something called a virtual ID that is like a temporary number linked to your Aadhaar ID that you can revoke, kind of. So they are doing some things. They have, in terms of architecture, security architecture, it's pretty impressive. But again, if the leaks are coming from elsewhere, then that's a big problem. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks, we are at closing ceremonies now. I'd like to thank you all for sticking around today, and even those of you running for the door.